Willow Glen Estates was supposed to be a fresh start. After years in the city, I wanted quiet mornings, a safe place to raise my daughter, and a backyard where my wife Claire and I could sip coffee without hearing sirens. We found that promise at the edge of a cul-de-sac, tucked beneath old maples and behind a white picket fence. The house was modest, a little run down, but I liked it that way, something real. Unfortunately, I also inherited the neighborhood's worst-kept secret, Karen Whitmore. Karen was the self-appointed queen of Willow Glen's HOA, a retired interior designer with too much time and a clipboard that might as well have been engraved with a crown. You'd hear her heels clicking down the sidewalk every morning, like a metronome of menace, always watching, always judging. She enforced the HOA rulebook like it was federal law, except she wrote most of the rules herself. It started with the wind chimes. 2 days after we moved in, I installed a simple bronze set on the porch. My daughter Nora had picked them out at the farmer's market, said the sound reminded her of her grandmother's old porch swing. A small comfort. One morning, I stepped outside to find a note taped to the front door, printed in bold Comsic, sans, noise ordinance violation, remove wind chimes immediately. It was signed President Whitmore. I removed them, at first, but then came the other notes. Infractions for my grass being 1.5 inches above standard, the flag on my porch being overly large, and the new storm door not approved by the HOA's aesthetic committee. My work-from-home schedule allowed me to address them quickly. That didn't help. Every fix seemed to provoke 3 more warnings. Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was inventing them. Claire warned me early on. She's looking for someone to control. Don't let her pick you. But I already knew I'd been chosen. It wasn't just the citations. Packages started going missing. Once, someone left a garbage bag of dog poop beneath my truck. The security camera I installed to catch the culprit became a new target. Surveillance cameras, Karen wrote in her latest notice, violate neighborhood privacy expectations. When I pushed back, filing a formal complaint to the HOA board, I learned it was a farce. Karen was the board. Terry from across the street was her enforcer. Clipboard always in hand. Janet, the secretary, lived 2 doors down and spent most days spying from behind her curtains like a Cold War informant. Then she crossed the line. I came home one afternoon to find Claire sitting rigid on the couch, her lips a thin line. Nora was in her room, headphones on. She tried to get into the house. Claire said without preamble, "While you were gone," said she had the right to inspect the basement. The basement? I blinked. The storm shelter. She said it was non-compliant living space. I told her to leave. She said she'd be back with official authorization. I felt heat crawl up my spine. I'd ignored her long enough, hoping she'd get bored, move on. But now she was coming to my door, demanding entry into my home. That wasn't a violation. That was trespassing. I installed another camera, this one hidden in a porch light. I printed copies of property boundaries and homeowner rights. I posted a clearly visible no trespassing sign beside the mailbox. Claire, ever methodical, filed a report with the sheriff's non-emergency line, documenting the confrontation, just in case. But I knew Karen wouldn't stop, because people like Karen don't crave order. They crave obedience. And the more I resisted, the more she viewed it as defiance. Still, I underestimated her. She wouldn't just bang on my door again. No, she'd go bigger, bolder. She'd try to weaponize the system itself. And when she finally made her move, by calling 911 in a theatrical attempt to break into my house, she made one critical mistake. She didn't know my wife was the dispatcher on duty, and by the time Karen realized that, she'd already stepped too far over the line. The moment Claire radioed me from the dispatch booth, I knew something had gone down. I was in the garage, replacing the back fence slats Karen had deemed a visual nuisance, when my phone buzzed. 3 sharp vibrations. Our code for urgent, but not dangerous. I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered. She did it, Claire said without greeting. Karen just called 911. My blood froze. What did she say? She reported a suspected squatter inside your house. Claire's tone was clipped, professional, but I could hear the fury just beneath it. Said the homeowner was out of town and that she had HOA authority to enter and verify the property wasn't being illegally occupied. She's insane, I muttered. Claire's breath hitched. She demanded a welfare check, claimed she heard shouting and thought someone was being held against their will. She's escalating, Tom. Did she say my name? Nope. She avoided it carefully. She wanted it to sound like she was a concerned neighbor, but I recognized her voice instantly, and I'm the one who took the call. Karen didn't know Claire was a 911 dispatcher. It wasn't something we advertised. Claire preferred a low profile, especially around nosy neighbors, but Karen's arrogance had finally come back to bite her. I dispatched Officer Harlan. Claire continued, told him everything off record. You're going to want to be home when he gets there. I already am. 10 minutes later, the police cruiser rolled into the cul-de-sac. Karen was already there, standing on my front lawn in her Sunday best, peach blouse, white pants, a visor perched atop her frosted blonde curls. She had her HOA clipboard in one hand and a printed stack of documents in the other, probably her own made-up bylaws. As Officer Harlan stepped out of the cruiser, Karen surged forward. Officer, thank goodness, she began, her voice a symphony of false concern. I'm the HOA president. I've received multiple complaints about possible illegal activity inside this home. The owner is away, and I believe someone has broken in. Harlan held up a hand. Mom, I'll take it from here. I stepped onto the porch. Hey, officer, I live here. Karen spun. Her expression contorted, like someone had dumped a cold bucket of reality over her head. What are you doing here? I live here. I repeated. This is my home. She blinked, momentarily stunned. Then she recovered, straightening. That's not possible. You told the HOA you were traveling for the week. No, Karen. I told the HOA I work remotely. You assumed I was gone because I didn't answer your unannounced visits. Karen's face flushed. You're squatting. This property is in violation of multiple HOA codes. Officer Harlan stepped in, firm. Ma'am, did you make the 911 call? Yes, Karen snapped. As president of the Homeowners Association, I have the right. You don't, he interrupted. You're not law enforcement. A 911 is for emergencies, not HOA disputes. You said someone was being held against their will? Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. For once, her words failed her. There was no screaming, I said, crossing my arms. No one in distress, just me, working in my garage, fixing a fence she filed a complaint about. Karen's eyes narrowed. He's lying. He's manipulating this whole. You made a false report, Harlan said. That's a criminal offense. And you tried to gain access to private property under that false pretense. Karen stepped back. Wait, I didn't know. I thought I was just trying to help. You didn't even confirm who lived here, Harlan said. And for your information, the dispatcher you spoke to, that was his wife. Karen's eyes widened in slow motion horror. She looked at me, then toward the patrol car, then at the clipboard still trembling in her grip. You tricked me, she whispered. No, I said quietly. You underestimated me. Harlan took the clipboard from her hand and motioned toward the cruiser. "You're coming with me," Karen sputtered. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president." "Exactly why this needs to be documented," he replied. "You used that title to impersonate authority. That's serious." He guided her toward the cruiser. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Someone across the street started filming. Karen's cries echoed down the block. "This is a mistake. I'll have your badge." As the car door shut and the cruiser pulled away, I stood there in silence. I had expected a confrontation, but not a public takedown. Still, it was only the beginning, because while Karen was headed for booking, I had bigger plans. She'd spent years bending rules, bullying neighbors, and rewriting HOA policy like it was her personal manifesto. Now, I was going to dismantle the very empire she built, one rule at a time. Karen was back on the street by morning. No mugshot, no jail time, just a citation, a warning, and a furious email to the HOA mailing list, declaring her wrongfully detained by an officer with a clear conflict of interest. It would have been laughable if it weren't so calculated. She cast herself as the victim, again, spinning the story to the board, twisting facts, claiming she had only called 911 out of concern for community safety, but she hadn't anticipated what came next. Claire and I weren't interested in revenge for its own sake. We wanted change, real change, and the only way to get it was through the one thing Karen had always used against us, the HOA charter. So I started reading, night after night, while Claire reviewed call logs at dispatch, and Nora did her homework. I pored over the HOA bylaws, 63 pages of jargon, loopholes, and self-serving clauses that Karen had quietly massaged over the years. I found her fingerprints everywhere, rules amended in her handwriting, notes from meetings no one remembered being held, and a conveniently buried clause that gave the board president discretionary enforcement powers without needing majority approval. That was the crack in the armor. But I needed more, so I talked to neighbors. At first, they were cautious, afraid of retaliation, but slowly they started to open up. Mr. Gomez, 3 doors down, revealed Karen fined him $500 for planting sunflowers too close to the curb. Sarah and James, a young couple, admitted they'd been denied permission to build a playset for their twins because plastic structures lower property values. A retired vet named Walt confessed Karen reported his therapy dog as a code violation disguised as a pet. They were all tired, defeated, but they were also waiting, hoping for someone to push back. So I gave them a reason. I organized a neighborhood meeting, not under the HOA's umbrella, but independently. We held it in my backyard, far from Karen's watchful gaze. I invited every homeowner on the block. 30 showed up. 20 more sent messages of support. I shared everything: the video of Karen trying to enter my home, the 911 transcript Claire had requested through a public records request, and the HOA's own charter. I highlighted every abuse of power, every manipulated clause. I explained how the bylaws allowed for a recall election of the board president if 51% of homeowners signed a petition. By the end of the night, I had 42 signatures. We submitted the petition the next morning. Karen tried to fight it, of course, declared it illegitimate, tried to postpone the vote, citing procedural irregularities. But she no longer controlled the narrative. I had emailed every homeowner the documentation. Claire, using her connections, had already filed an official complaint with the state HOA Oversight Board. When the recall vote happened 2 weeks later, it wasn't even close. 3% voted to remove her. Karen didn't show up to the meeting. Her house went dark. Rumor had it she'd gone to stay with a sister in New Mexico. to recover from the trauma. We didn't celebrate, not outwardly. There was still work to do. With Karen gone, the board restructured. I was nominated and voted in as interim president, unanimously. Not because I wanted the title, but because the neighborhood needed healing. It needed transparency, fairness. The first thing we did, eliminate every bylaw Karen had personally altered without a vote. We reinstated community review. We created an appeals process for violations. We hosted open forums where neighbors could bring concerns and proposals without fear of fines or public shaming. For the first time in years, Willow Glen felt like a neighborhood again. The grass didn't need to be perfect. The fences didn't need to be uniform. The wind chimes could ring freely. Still, part of me wondered if Karen would return. People like her don't fade quietly. But if she did come back, she'd find a community she no longer recognized. One that had learned to speak up, to push back, to stand together, and she'd find me waiting, not as a target, but as a leader. Karen returned under the cover of dusk. I noticed her silver Lexus creeping back into the cul-de-sac, just past 9 p.m. 3 weeks after the recall vote. She parked halfway in her own driveway, halfway in the street, an old habit, violating a rule. She herself had written, "Some things never changed, but everything else had." Claire was sitting on the porch with me, her laptop open on her knees. Dispatch work long done for the night. We both watched Karen step out of the car. No HOA clipboard, no designer handbag, just a woman deflated, eyes darting like a caged animal, finally realizing the bars were self-forged. She looks smaller. Claire said quietly, "She doesn't have power anymore." I replied. The next morning, Karen made her move. She showed up at the community meeting we hosted every second Saturday, the one held at the rec center, where she'd once banned gatherings that weren't board sanctioned. She walked in during open discussion, dressed in a pale blue pantsuit, lips pursed tight. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. No one rose to greet her. Not anymore. I stood at the front, hands steady, clipboard in hand. "Karen," I said, calm but firm. "Here for something specific." She gave a tight smile. "I'd like to address the board. This isn't a board meeting. It's a neighborhood forum. But you're welcome to speak during open floor." She hesitated, unused to the shift in authority. Then she stepped forward and cleared her throat. "I know there's been tension," she began, voice sugar-coated and brittle. "I may have made decisions in the past that some of you disagreed with, but I always acted with the community's best interests in mind." A few scoffs scattered through the crowd. Karen pressed on. "The HOA needs strong leadership, not mob rule. These recent changes have opened the door to chaos. I'm offering to return, to stabilize what's been broken." The room went still. Then a soft voice from the back spoke up. "You broke it." Heads turned. It was Mrs. Yamamoto, the oldest resident on the street, a soft-spoken gardener who'd once been fined for painting her mailbox a shade of green Karen didn't like. "You turned neighbors against each other," she continued. "You fined me for flowers. You made Walt cry over his dog." Karen's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing. Another voice joined in. "You towed my son's car during finals week," said James, "because it was too dusty. You told me my porch swing looked uncivilized," added another. One by one, neighbors stood, not shouting, but stating facts. Calm, firm. The truth laid bare like bricks in a wall she could no longer climb. Karen stood frozen at the center of it all. No longer the queen of the HOA court, but a dethroned tyrant facing the verdict of her own people. Claire stood beside me now, arms crossed. Karen turned to her, grasping for familiarity. You knew who I was when I called 911. You set me up. Claire's eyes narrowed. No, you set yourself up. I just answered the phone. Karen's expression crumbled. For the first time, she looked less like a villain and more like someone suddenly aware of just how far she'd fallen. I didn't mean to, she began, but the words dissolved. I took a breath. Karen, we're not looking for revenge. We're building a community, one where everyone has a voice, and no one is above the rules. She didn't reply, just turned and walked out of the room. No applause, no protest, just silence. The next day, a moving truck pulled into her driveway. By sundown, she was gone. We didn't throw a party. There were no victory signs, no champagne toasts. Instead, the neighborhood kept doing what it had learned to do: gather, talk, rebuild. In the months that followed, the changes deepened. Kids played on new swing sets. Porch lights stayed on later. Neighbors waved more. The fences Karen once deemed aesthetic hazards were painted in the colors their owners actually liked. And me? I stepped down as president after my term. I never wanted power. I just wanted peace. Claire and I took a trip we'd put off for years. A cabin in the Smokies. No calls, no committees, just us and the sound of wind through pine. Before we left, the board framed a new HOA motto, one voted on by the entire neighborhood. It read, "Respect over rules, community over control, because justice isn't loud. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, sometimes it's watching. The one who tried to break you, walk away powerless, and knowing the home they once ruled is finally free."